Welcome back to another episode of Micro Moments of Self-Love, where we delve into the minds of some exceptional individuals who are changing the world one micro moment at a time. I'm your host, Fatima Deoji, and today we have an amazing guest with us, Jalal Moughania, who is going to be talking about the journey within. Today's episode is a reminder that within us lies a universe of potential waiting to be unleashed. Let's get started. Jalal, it's such a pleasure to have you here on Micro Moments of Self-Love. Thank you for making the time. I know you're here just for 24 hours, but it's just, I've been following your work, and I think that you have so much to share on our podcast topic today, which is the journey within, and looking at our internal world and how it basically mirrors what we see, right, in the outside. So I'm just gonna start off by saying, I see you wearing a lot of Muhammad Ali t-shirts in a lot of your videos. So what's the story? Why did you do that?
So thank you, Fatima, for allowing me to be here and have this conversation with you, and for inviting me. It's definitely a privilege to be here. Muhammad Ali, as we would say in America, he's a big inspiration for a lot of people. And for me personally, I would say my take on being inspired by him has so much to do with his connection to his own purpose, and how his God-centric, purpose-driven mindset guided him in not just when he was on top, but also when he was facing a lot of challenges and difficulties. And even though he had, this very, some would say, cocky and almost even arrogant, way of dealing with people and dealing with things, always like telling people off, and he always brought himself down to God is the greatest. He always brought himself down to that my purpose in this life is to be a servant of God and to call people towards God. And there's a core value that I have that I've shared and implemented in my work settings and my personal life and throughout, and I'll talk about that, the whole kind of integration of values across like your personal and professional life. But for me, being a champion is very important. And what that means essentially is, how do you be the best in your space, be a winner, win, and then also empower and enfranchise other people to win as well, with the mindset that ultimately that winning doesn't happen without God. Yeah. So I feel like Muhammad Ali inspires that in me and in so many people. So just as a tribute to him, I like to wear him on my t-shirts and share that universal message.
Yeah, it makes a big difference, what you wear, because I actually had I have an inspirational clothing line called FD The Movement. So nice. I'm very much about what you wear, how you speak to yourself, and I know what you said about how he was cocky, when he spoke, but all the videos I've watched of him, he talks about how he was a servant of God, right? Yeah. How he wakes up in the morning to pray, because that's the most important thing to him, And I think one thing we forget is that Islam teaches us to have value for ourselves. It teaches us to love ourselves, right? And Imam Ali speaks about this all the time, where he says, that you are the entire universe. You have it inside of you. You are amazing. You are this great entity, right? So don't sell yourself short, And I think this is what he was teaching, a healthy sense of self-love, right? That we should all have. But at the end of the day, the humility that comes with it, And I think that also, just as a fellow, like a sportswoman, I'm so inspired by him because of his discipline, his humility as well. Whether he won, he lost, like he'd hype himself up, but he was very humble, So I think it's so nice. It's so nice to see people also have Muslim role models, to look up to.
And I think just like a quick point on that with regards to the role models, you mentioned Imam Ali alayhi salam. Imam Ali alayhi salam is the ultimate role model, second only to our Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When I look at Muhammad Ali, it's definitely not in that respect. It's in that very practical, like I look at Muhammad Ali in that sense of he's he's that relatable person, that everyday human being that was competing, that was trying to be his best and highest self, you know, in the past century, right? That person that was having his own journey. A lot of times people, unfortunately, distance themselves from, you know, the role models of our faith that are sent by God, like the Prophet and his family, because the assumption that, you know what, they're perfect, I can't be like them, right? The idea is not necessarily for one to emulate with the destination of, I am going to be like Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I'm going to be like Ali, in the sense of like, that's the station I'm going to attain. It's the journey, the pursuit, that's the actual objective. So when I look at Muhammad Ali, I see somebody, and by the way, like when I was saying like the whole cocky aspect, that was like when he was in those interviews, while he was competing, you know, when he was getting like, you know, face to face with the other fighters, and a lot of it was entertainment, and he'd speak about it later on, but like later on in his life, definitely he would be interviewed for like, what is he doing after he's been fighting all this time? And he's saying, you know, I'm preparing to meet my Lord, right? And you're inspired by that because you see also an individual who played a role as as one of the top competitive athletes of all time. Like if you look at, make a short list of athletes, of like who's at the very top. I mean, you have maybe Muhammad Ali, Babe Ruth, and like Michael Jordan, let's say, right? It's that list. Muhammad Ali is going to be in that list, right? When I'm looking at this, I'm seeing somebody who took their role and then didn't just limit themselves to, hey, I'm finished boxing, that's all it is, and then I'm done. That was a phase and a way for them to fulfill their greater purpose, right? Which was ultimately being a servant of God.
Absolutely.
You mentioned a beautiful saying from Imam Ali alayhi salam. That's literally a saying that I can't help myself but mention it wherever I go. In the original Arabic, and I love sharing it, because when I heard it, the first time I heard it and the first time I read it, it hit my heart in a different way. وَتَحْسَبُ أَنَّكَ جُرْمٌ صَغِيرٌ وَفِيكَ انطوى الْعَالَمُ الْأَكْبَرُ. You suppose you're an insignificant thing, you're small, you're unworthy, but within you lies the greater universe. That idea of having the greater, like that pumps me up wherever I go. And naturally, I think as a professional and as somebody who is highly ambitious in every space I'm in, I'm very competitive, but I'm not necessarily competitive with the people around me. And people like, what do you mean by that? Like, I'm constantly challenging myself of how do I be better in the space that I'm in. Yes, there are other people. Yes, there are other, like, there's references. There's a framework that is like, okay, who's doing what in this space? But I'm like, man, I need to see me in this space. What am I doing in this space? How can I be best in this space? But even as a very competitive person, as someone who's like so much about growth and development and success, I have moments of doubt. You know, I have moments of like, man, am I good enough? And then I go back to Imam Ali alayhi salam. How can you think you're insignificant? Within you lies the greater universe. And by the way, the completion of that narration, it speaks to your cure is within you, but you don't know it. Your sickness is from you, yet you don't sense it. You would not need anything outside of you if only you would reflect. And I was like, oh man. That's why we love him so much. You can't help it.
You know, I feel like Islam is so beautiful because I think it's the only religion where you get like, or it's the only faith where you get points for striving, for trying, for the effort. You know, and that is what I feel like I've started to understand, that, like you said, sometimes, you know, we look at these people and we're like, oh my gosh, like these personalities are just, it's so difficult. Like their patience, their emotional intelligence, you know, it's out of this world, right? But I think that the idea is that, you know, they say that Allah wants you to kill yourself over and over and over again. Like a true Muslim kills themselves over 70 times in a day, right? To strive to get to God. And I think that's the most important part, you know. And speaking of Imam Ali, you know, actually, I'm going to share a little bit about this. Like, he was the inspiration for my book, The Alchemy of Self-Love. So I'm a business writer. I write articles on marketing, on business, on leadership. You know, I've written my first 2 books on marketing. But what happened is about 2.5 years ago, you know, I think because I was working so much, you know, and I was doing, like, you know, I think we're very similar in that way. We're constantly doing, and you're just doing so many things that there was so much chaos within me, you know. I felt like, you know, I was, like I'd reached a point where I had a nervous breakdown because of the overworking, and, you know, you're doing fulfilling stuff, but you're not feeling the fulfillment, you know. And this is where basically I realized that, okay, I have to slow down, you know. I have to start looking within and trying to figure out what's going on. And I think a lot of us these days, in the age of social media, we don't realize, as much as we might think we're grounded, we don't realize that we're seeking this external validation. And it's never going to stop, right? Because it's just a movement of a goalpost. Every day you're trying to, you know, you're trying to make someone else happy, and the next day the goalpost shifts. You know, whether, you know, it could be social media, it could be your spouse, it could be your family, anyone, right? And I think for me, I struggled with that a lot because I really just wanted to make sure that I was making everyone around me happy, that I was doing the best I could, you know, even if that meant killing myself over my work. And this is where I think the most important thing I learned is that, like you said, everything you need is inside you, right? Focus on making sure that you're also creating a relationship with yourself, you know? And I wanted to ask, you know, you are in this space, you know, you're also managing your brand, your personal brand, but at the same time you're rooted in your faith and in God. How do you not let this, like, how do you create a balance and not let this external validation take over?
I think that's an excellent question. And as you're sharing that, Fatima, I'm thinking about, like, my own journey, not just within, like, the social media platforms, but beyond that. Like, what do I need to be okay? And where do I get it from? And I was having a conversation with my wife the other day about this, and we were talking about, you know, where do we get validation from? And who do we actually need it from? And it's when you're seeking validation, sometimes not knowingly, from the sources that you don't actually need it from, that's when things go out of whack, right? So for me, like, plainly, there's 2 people that I really need, I wouldn't even say validation from, I need a nod from. My mentor and my wife. And that's it. If I have that, I'm good. Yeah. So my mentor is basically like, listen, keeps me in check. If I'm veering off this way, I'm veering off this way. Jalal, like, he reels me in on anything, right? On the smallest things. Like, people may not even be like, wow, really? Even on that? I'm like, yeah, even on that. That's for me. And I always will, inshallah, I'll always have that so long as he accepts me to continue being his mentee. My wife's my backbone. And for me, it's important for all the things that I'm doing outside of our home, that your home is your stability, right? Without my wife, I wouldn't be able to do all the different things that I've done. She's been the greatest supporter for me throughout the years. I got married very young. I got married at the age of 19. You know, our religious marriage was I was 19, 20 years old, right? And so we've been married for well over, you know, a decade now. And alhamdulillah, it's been such an amazing journey because she's been that partner. And really with us, and I mentioned this right now, and I hope it's some inspiration and some help for other young professionals, for people that are going through their own journey. When you have your person and your values are aligned, all you need is that person to tell you, I believe in you. Like the other day we were talking and my wife, she told me, she's like, I believe in you, go for it. I think I was having like a 16-hour day. I literally jumped up, right? I was like, that's all I needed. And she started laughing. She's like, you're so funny. I'm like, that's literally all I need, right? I just need that, right? Why is it though with these two people for me? Now, of course, you want to make sure your parents are pleased with you, rida al-walidain. You want to make sure that, especially your mother, heaven is at her feet. God bless my mother. She's always been a support for me. But for me, it's when it comes to these specific situations and validation, anybody around me can say, you can't do it, you can't do it, you can't do it. But like I'm good, I can. I know why. Because the ultimate validation is coming from God. And the values are aligned perfectly so that when I'm going towards doing something, I know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God, I'm doing it for you. You have my back. The whole world can be against me, but if I have God's favor, I'm good. I'm good. So, whether it's social media and people that are counting their likes and the shares and right now, and I say this confidently, right now, alhamdulillah, my social media pages, they've been growing, right? And I get told like, oh, you're getting really popular on social media and your things are trending and like even on like TikTok and I don't even go on TikTok. I have one of my team members that's just like posting it for me. Like I don't know TikTok, honestly, I don't, right? If my social media presence moves outside of my alignment and values, I will shut it down immediately. And that's a conversation I had with my mentor, and I was talking about the whole idea of making sure that you're good with your values at any point in time. And I mentioned social media because I think it's most relevant to people, because that's where most people are living. So you're living on your Instagram page, you're living on your TikTok page, you're living on your Snapchat page, whatever it is. I tell people like, listen, if this is taking you away from your goals, and this is taking you away from your purpose, and taking you away ultimately from God, shut it down. You don't have time. I operate with a very high sense of urgency.
Yeah.
Like I don't have time. My family, my wife, my kids, my community, my people, there's a lot of people that are relying on me. And I don't know, today may be my last. I'm choosing to have this conversation with Fatima because I see an alignment of values, I see potential, I see good work that can be done. I see a good conversation that can be had, that could impact lives. So I'm gonna approach it, make time for it, and have a sense of urgency like, this has to happen, this has to get done. Like, for me coming here, and we were just talking about it earlier, how I got delayed from flight to flight. I was literally going from country to country. I mean, I was like, literally, my destination is Dar es Salaam, and so for some reason I was about to be in Egypt and Istanbul and Turkey, and I'm like, alhamdulillah, I stopped in Jeddah, which was like cool. I was like, man, I wish I would be able to actually go down and go to Medina and go to Mecca, but that didn't happen. I came to Dar es Salaam, I'm here, alhamdulillah. We have to operate with a high sense of urgency. We don't know how much time we have. Anything that falls outside of the alignment of your values needs to get shut down. Mm-hmm. You need to treat yourself with that level of respect. If you don't treat yourself with that level of respect, you're never going to grow. And I'm not saying this because, I always had this figured out. I had to look myself in the mirror week after week, month after month, year after year. Till now, I still challenge myself to be like, are you fully aligned? Are you doing what you need to do? What else needs to be done, or what else needs to be shut down so that you can be your best and highest self? If you don't, when your time's up, are you gonna regret it? Or are you going to be like this gentleman who I was driving in the car with, my Uber driver, who honestly, I'm so grateful for those moments that I had with him on my way to the airport in Detroit. 72-year-old African-American gentleman who I told him I'm praying for him, and if I don't know if by any chance he watches this, like, I'm praying for you, brother. you inspired me, honestly. He said, listen, I lived a life with, I'm happy where I am. I lived a good life. I took care of my family. I did what I needed to do. He was talking to me about certain pursuits that he had. He wasn't able to pursue like this career or this education that he had for different reasons. But he's like, but I lived a good life. And he's like, and if I go now, I'm happy. I'm like, man, that's beautiful. That's success, right? And he was asking me like, what do you do for a living, young man? And I was, I'm a lawyer, also I'm a law professor, and I write. And he was like, oh, good for you. And he was so pumped and excited. And he's like, where are you going? I was telling him, I'm going to be speaking. I'm stopping in London and Dar es Salaam. And he's like, and he was so like, he's like, I'm proud of you. I'm like, that means so much for me. Thank you so much. I told him, but I'm more inspired by you because of the contentment that he shared. He didn't even use the word content, but he showed contentment in his journey. And he's like, I lived a good life. And essentially it was God-centric. Essentially it was purpose-driven. I was like, man, there's so much to take away from that. And you were mentioning the micro moments. For me, that was a micro moment. And I loved and appreciated and was grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for giving me that. Yeah. And I'm constantly, every single day, and I think if we take these moments of pause, reflect and realize, every single day God is giving you an overwhelming amount of opportunities to be centered. I'm not even telling you to slow down. I'm telling you, just center and be focused on, man, God loves you and God is there for you and He's providing for you and He just wants you to be happy and successful and grow. Yeah. Like a lot of people, when it comes to our relationship with God, and I want to try to tie this in, our relationship with God can either be one of fear or one of like a transaction. And I go back to the hadith from Imam Ali alayhi salam about how do people worship God. Imam Ali alayhi salam, he says, there are people that worship God out of fear of His punishment. Okay, worship God, you don't want to go to hell. No worries. He said that is the worship of slaves. He said there's those individuals that worship God out of a yearning for, a greed in, wanting His reward. Almost transactional. God, I'm going to worship you because you're giving me this paradise. That's the worship of merchants. He said, and then there's a third form of worship. Worshiping God because He is worthy of worship. And that is the worship of a free man. Fatima, I will tell you, in my short life that I've lived so far, I'm in like this desire, this pursuit of freedom. And I'm not saying it because I'm American, right? Because Americans talk about freedom all the time, right? The idea of being free. Constantly saying, how does one free themselves? When you realize your freedom is with God, that's it. Like, we all experience stress, anxiety, we all get overwhelmed, we all have different things that we're going through. Like, as soon as I'm not saying shut it off. No, deal with it. But as soon as you use and hold on to the rope of God, then suddenly you have the strength and the ability to deal with whatever it is that you're facing. And there's a short prayer, and then I'll give it back to you, Fatima, because I'm just gonna keep going, right? There's a short prayer that my mentor taught me when facing anxiety, being overwhelmed, and it's actually attributed to Imam al-Jawad alayhi salam. It's called Hariz al-Jawad. The supplication is short. It goes like this: Ya man yakfi min kulli shay, wa la yakfi minhu shay, ikfini ma ahammani. O you, Ya Allah, O you who is sufficient from everything, but nothing is sufficient without you. Suffice me from what overwhelms me, what brings me anxiety, what's burdening me. And just put it on repeat. And like, when I started using that as a practice, it automatically allowed me to not run away from my problems, but deal with them resolve them, work through them with God.
Yeah. No, it's, we spoke a little bit about this before we started, about how that God should be the center, and I think that what's important is we say this all the time in our shahada, la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, and when you look at it from a very plain perspective, right, and you're even speaking to a non-Muslim, they'll tell you, oh, what does it mean? And you tell them, oh, it just means there's no God but Allah. But I actually spent a lot of time pondering over what that meant, right? In Islam, shirk is the biggest it's like the worst thing you can do, right? But how many fake idols do we have? Whether it is our material possessions, or it's our fame, or it's even our dependency on people, right? On like, to the extent where it cripples us when things go wrong, right? And I think the ultimate concept of la ilaha illallah is you killing all these fake idols and always reminding yourself that the ultimate goal is Allah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the ultimate goal, and that the more you remind yourself of this every single day, it just makes it makes your life a lot easier. Because I think one of the biggest, and this is the first chapter of my book, is it's called To Know Yourself is to Know the Divine, right? And one of the biggest problems with today's world is that who knows themselves? No one knows themselves. Right now, we're getting pulled by so many concepts and so many people telling us who we are. And because we don't take the time to understand who we are, to take the time to really reflect on what we want, then it's so easy for people to manipulate us, for social media to manipulate us, for these influencers to manipulate us, right? I'm in marketing. I know the power of manipulation. I know how easy it is to convince someone. But if you sit there and you actually spend time with yourself, and a lot of our Prophet did this, our Imams did this, they encourage isolation and stillness, right? This concept of doing and doing and doing, which I love, like you said, I think it's so important. Spend your time wisely, spend it doing, creating creating an impact, right? Do things that make you feel alive, do things that of value, of purpose, but also find moments of stillness, find moments during the day to just, with yourself, to ask yourself, what am I doing? Am I enjoying what I'm doing? Is it making an impact? Does it, like you said, align with the values? Is it God-centric? And I think a lot of the issues right now is that, again, we're just living so outside of ourselves. Everything is able to manipulate us. People are beginning to tell us who we are, and that will take you as far away from God as can be, So I think it's so important to constantly reflect, and take examples from, we have such beautiful examples from the Ahlul Bayt, and I say this all the time, for me, the biggest superpower is emotional regulation. And where have we learned this? Is through our Imams. How nothing could shake them. Like, they went through the worst things, and they even went through the best things, but nothing shook their core, right? There's that quote of Imam Ali where he says, it doesn't matter if you I think you can help me with this, whether you put the curtains, you remove the curtains between me and Allah, my faith in him is not going to change, right? Because I think the biggest issue right now is that sorry, I just lost my train of thought. I'm so sorry.
No, you're good.
It was my train of thought.
You're doing well.
Sorry,
keep going.
Sorry, I just said. No, I was just trying to remember what the point was. Oh my gosh. Okay. Anyways, let me just.
It's okay.
Anyways, I know.
If you want,
yeah.
I can pick up from there on stillness.
Yeah, please do.
Sure.
Do. Yeah,
I got you.
Yeah.
I got you. Here for you, Fatima. Don't worry, I got you.
Okay, perfect.
Right. Fatima, you mentioned the point on stillness and having these moments of isolation. And definitely, like, you have Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he would go to the cave of Hira and he would have his moments of isolation. You have Imam Ali alayhi salam that describes the prayer in the mosque as more dear to him than the reward of paradise. One thing though I want to make sure that people realize is, in our faith, that stillness and those moments of isolation should be within a lifestyle that is fully integrated. And what I mean by that is, some people have a misconception on religiosity, and that those who are religious, those who are faithful, or those who are detached from the everyday life. So it's a surprise, for example, those who are in, I would say, the worldly sense, successful or wealthy or of means, that they can also be highly religious people or highly spiritual people, right? And when I say spirituality, I mean spirituality not as a feeling, spirituality as a discipline, spirituality as a commitment, iltizam, to religion, to faith. There can be a huge opportunity for people if they realize that faith and religion can be a foundation of success. That if you use your religion as your foundation, as a guiding compass, you can be massively successful in your personal and professional life. You can be massively successful in entrepreneurship, in business. The people that I hear sometimes say that, hey, listen, don't mix religion and business together. I'm always baffled by it. I was like, man, why wouldn't I mix them together when I know that being more faithful, being more religious, being more God-centric is actually going to make me so much more successful in business? Like, no, religion complicates things, it restricts you, you're not able to do this and that. I'm like, no, man, you're looking at it in the wrong way. Instead of seeing your religion, your faith, your commitment to God as being one that's restricting, instead look at it as God giving you the cheat codes to, hey, listen, stay away from this, it's gonna distract you from your goals. Stay away from this because it's going to mess you up in an area where like, you don't have time for that. So if I'm meeting my life with that sense of urgency, it was like, I don't have time to mess up, right? So if I follow God's word and what He's described for me, what He's prescribed for me, I'm going to limit those mess ups that I would have, the distractions that I would have. Yeah. That's a completely different way of seeing it versus, religion stops me from being who I want to be, stops me from being successful, stops me, restricts me. It's all these limitations.
There's a wave of people now who are like, I'm spiritual. And, they tell you like, I'm spiritual and therefore I don't need to, I don't need to pray to get close to God. I don't need to fast. But, self-love is self-discipline. Allah has put that because He is teaching us how to love ourselves. You pray 5 times a day in order to get closer to Him. You fast in Ramadan to get closer to Him. And I think it's so important that I always use this metaphor. People say that, again, I can pray in any way, right? I don't need to pray 5 times a day. I pray in my own way. I see this a lot, right? And I tell them that, first of all, when you're drowning, right? For those who know how to swim, you have to follow a certain stroke to survive, right? You can't just doggy paddle and expect that you're going to survive, right? There is a sort of a technique to swim. There's a technique. If you want to get good at any sport, there's a technique. You can't just follow your own rules, right? The same way, Allah has set a technique for us to pray, to get closer to Him, right? And I think this concept is so important to remember because for my friends who start meditating at 20, 25 years old, right? Maybe 90% of them don't even stick to it every day because it's not ingrained in them, right? They don't even have the discipline to do it. They haven't been taught. A lot of people will say, well, you guys you're forcing, 9-year-olds to pray and to fast. But I always say the action sometimes comes before the thought, right? If you keep doing the action, once you're 15 years old, 16 years old, and you're actually struggling with a life issue, now all of a sudden you're like, oh wow, I've been doing all this. Now I can meditate in my prayer. Now I can focus on these things, right? And I think this is where, I'm of the thought that these are very important things. These are rules that we have to follow, right? That spirituality is nothing without the religiosity of things, that is the foundation, right? But I also want to speak a little bit about how it's like, I want you to tell me about how, I think sometimes, unfortunately, you get one spectrum of people where it's all religion, right? And I think that people really struggle with this sort of this accountability, this self-realization, this, the sense of self-awareness, right? And so how do you create a balance between the two?
So, in answering that, and then let me know, Fatima, and ask me again in case I miss it.
Yeah.
But self-actualization, accountability, making sure that you are doing what you need to be doing, comes from that foundation in faith, comes from that religious framework. I think the mistake that many of us make, and I don't want to make it about like, oh, there's a group of people that are out there. To me, anytime we talk about these things, I try to personalize it as much as I can, right? Because I'm not free from the challenges that people are facing. I'm going through it.
Yeah.
In whatever setting I'm in, I'm like, I let people know, I'm like, listen, I see you, I feel you, I hear you, I'm going through it with you.
Yeah.
The emphasis on faith needs to be one that is integrated into one's life. Why? Religion is the framework, is the foundation for God, for you in your life. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if I don't see my religion, this is the teachings, the prescriptions of how do you interact with God, how do you see God, how do you believe in God, and then allows you, how do I interact and see and behave with myself and everybody else, right? So when people say religion is one aspect of life, or being very religious but then it distances you from everything else in life, for me, again, I'm baffled by it, because that wasn't the prescription. Like, we don't, in Islam, for example, specifically, we don't have monasticism. We don't have this idea of completely isolating oneself from community. Will you have moments of isolation? Sure, right? But the idea of completely separating oneself from society and not being integrated in society is actually very off for us. The Prophet ﷺ, there's a beautiful story of his where he was going to the mosque, he would pray, he would go see people, and he would leave. A number of times he would go back and forth and he'd see the specific man praying in the same spot. Prophet would come, leave, go, come back. The guy was still praying in the same spot. So Prophet waited one day, it said, waited for him to finish between his prayers. Then went up to the man, Assalamu alaikum. He's like, Alaikum assalam ya Rasulullah. He's pumped, like all the Prophet is saying sounds to me. He's like, okay, I see you here often. He's like, yeah, I've dedicated myself to a life of worship. Okay, do you have a family? It's like, yeah, I have wife and children. He's like, okay, who takes care of them while you're here worshiping all day? He said, well, I've tasked my brother with taking care of them while I've dedicated myself to a life of worship. It's said that the Prophet told him, leave now, go and take care of your family, and that is your worship. Like, I look at that as a man, as a father, as a husband, as a whatever role I may have, right? I didn't mention anything like in the profession, but just as my personal roles. And I'm like, you taking care of your family is worship of God. Take a moment to really just think on that. We're not talking about worship of God merely through spiritual acts, the spiritual rituals. Those, yes, they center you. And there's certain prescriptions within the faith that say certain things are obligatory, certain things are recommended, right? Certain things, etc., 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 and they should be observed. But if you are God-centric, and you're purpose-driven, and God is your purpose, then you're going to see the worship of God in everything that you do. Me coming here, Fatima coming here, the team coming here, could actually be worship of God right now. Behind the camera, in front of the camera, a person listening right now, tuning in right now. You may be watching this right now on Instagram as a cut, as a reel. That actually could be worship.
Absolutely.
Why? Your intention and your mindset and your desire for that thing that you're doing is it godly or not? Is God in it for you or not? This is where, like, when I'm looking at even the notions that you had mentioned earlier with regards to like our kids, like 9 years old, you know, how are you doing this for a young girl, making her, forcing her to pray, forcing her to wear hijab. I'll give my daughter, right? I'm not gonna talk conceptually. I'm gonna share with you my daughter Zahra. My daughter Emily Zahra, she's 6 years old. Every day she asks us if she can wear her hijab outside. Every day. It's not something that we force her to do. It's not something that, and like literally, sometimes we have to tell her, Baba, maybe not here, maybe not now, right? Give it, like, she's like, but I want to. And then I ask her, why do you want to? And she will talk about what it does for her, right? That's one. Two, when it comes to prayer, whenever I pray at home, right? For a lot of young parents, they ask like, how do we encourage our kids to pray, right? My daughter is 6, my son Ali is 3.5, right? I'll come and I'll say, Baba, I'm gonna pray right now. I let them know I'm gonna pray right now. Who wants to pray with me, right? So my daughter Zahra usually will be like, yeah, Baba, I wanna pray with you. My son Ali is like 50-50, right? Sometimes he'll be like, yeah, I wanna pray. And sometimes he'll be like, no, thank you, I'm gonna play, right? So sometimes when they say no, I don't force them. I'll be like, okay, Baba, no worries. I'll play with you when I'm done praying. But they see me doing it, right? They're now developing a relationship with the things that their faith is going to require from them at the age that it becomes required. They're seeing it happening. They're not being forced into it. But I will tell you this, just like I tell my kids, and I make sure, my wife and I, we make sure they brush their teeth before they go to bed, and they brush their teeth when they wake up in the morning, and they wash their face, and we cut their fingernails, and we do all, and they shower, and they dress into pajamas, and all of these things, even though they don't want to, even though they may not like it. Like my son Ali, I don't want to take a bath. I don't want to brush my teeth. But you will. You know why? Because my responsibility as a parent is to give you the habits so that you can be successful. Because I'm not going to have my son be stank breath and go out with stinky breath out into the world. Just like I'm not going to have him be spiritually weak and not have prayer as part of his artillery, part of his ability to shield himself from the things he should be shielding himself out in the world. I need to protect him and build into those skills and those tools of protection for him physically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally. Those come into play. So this idea of like, oh, you can't force your children, you shouldn't force your children. Really? Are you going to allow your children not to be brushing their teeth, not washing their face, not dressing in clothes, and just go out into the world? I'm like, you are not being the parent you should be if you're actually doing that. Same thing spiritually. Same thing with, by the way, when it comes to respect, right? One of the things that I pride myself in, and I told my wife this, and we had conversations about it, and we're both like fully aligned. I don't care what my children end up being when they grow up when it comes to a career or a profession or etc. But I do care that they will be well-mannered. I do care that they will be emotionally intelligent. I do care that they care. That's all I care about. All right? So long as they're well-mannered, they're emotionally intelligent, and they actually care, I'm like, I'm good. All right? But that's all on me. What they end up choosing as a career, and you know, I want them, of course, to be massively successful in any space that they're in, but I need to give them those skills and those tools. So like to all the young parents out there, like you need to model that and you need to follow through and make sure, just like they're brushing their teeth and washing their face, you need to model the behavior of praying and then also explaining why we do what we do. And there's nothing wrong with raising your children in that way and really showing up for them in that sense and expecting that out of them. The key is following through and on different levels. My son Ali, the way I explained to him at 3.5, and he gets explanations, is different than the way my daughter gets an explanation at 6. But trust me, like when people say they're not old enough, I'm like, man, like, have you been listening to your kids? No, truly. Like we underestimate the ability of our youth. like youth, I mean like as children, not youth as in like teenagers and uni students. I'm talking about like our children. We underestimate them. They're amazing. The abilities that they have, they're like on a whole different level if you listen and if you allow them to be.
Yeah.
But if you want to ignore it and honestly not give it the time of day, yeah, you can always be that person that's going to say they're just kids. But man, kids can do phenomenal things if you let them.
And I think, children learn self-love from their parents, right? I think a lot of the mental health issues that, they say that obviously come from our childhood years, right? And I think a lot of children, they see a lot of the hypocrisy or the lack of synchronicity, as we say, right? You can tell your child, please, like, Ali, be respectful, but then you're here shouting at people, right? Or please pray namaz, and then you're not praying on time, right? So I think with children, you first of all, it's so important to the action and the sort of, the lesson comes together, right? You have to make sure that they're seeing this, and then they can follow through, and also forming a kind of friendship with them. I think doing it with a sense of love. A lot of parents, and a lot of us have struggled with this, where we have parents like my dad. He obviously, because he also started his own business, and like he started with nothing. Very military style, right? He kind of was a parent who was like, gotta do this, and I'm very grateful because of him we finished madrasa, because of him we recited Quran, because of him we're all very good sportsmen, right? Like we're all playing a sport professionally. But it was my mother who was the loving one. My mother who was like, like it's time to pray, let's go pray together. Or it's Ramadan, why don't you fast? And this is where I think it's so important for parents to understand that it's also how you teach your children, right? This instilling this fear, it creates a lot of rebellion in a child, right? Also doing things from a place from anger, then also like the child starts to perceive God in a very negative light. So it's very important for parents to encourage a lot of love and a lot of mercy, when they're teaching their children these disciplines, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think, I want to go back to a point you made very early on about how you have two people who you care about, their opinions you care about. You said your wife and your mentor, right? Yeah. I have one chapter in my book where I talk about your tribe, right? And I think as leaders, we know the importance of your tribe, right? We know how important it is to have the right kind of people around you, right? There's a fascinating TED Talk where this lady, she speaks about the 5 friends that you need to make you happy. The cheerleader, the mentor, the peer. She says, one second, I'm just gonna read it off. Yeah, it's the 5 people you need to be happy by Stacey Flowers. Cheerleader, mentor, coach, friend, and peer. Right? So I always I tell my husband this all the time. I tell him, look, you cannot be my everything, and I cannot be your everything, right? You have a role to play in my life, and I have a role to play in yours. But I have a friend I go to if I need mentorship. I have someone I go to when I need that cheerleader to just like you said, like your wife, someone who's just gonna, and I think sometimes, people don't realize it's a lot of work to be someone's whole world. Like it's a lot of pressure to go to just one person, and you also need a variety of sort of opinions and perspectives, when you're making decisions, right? So I want to ask you, like, I do talk a little bit about how is it that you, I think having the right kind of values also, it's that kind of attracts the people that you need in your life. But I want to ask you from like a very spiritual perspective, what is your advice to youth on picking the right kind of people in your life?
Yeah, I think that's a very, very important question. And I think it all goes back down to your values. You can't pick the right people in your life if you haven't figured yourself out. and true, your journey of figuring yourself out is going to continue in life. It's not going to be something that's like, all right, I'm 25 years old, I figured myself out. All right, 30, I figured myself out. Right? Okay, I'm 35 and I haven't figured myself out. It's okay, right? There is constantly going to be moments of your self-discovery, greater self-awareness. It's actually a daily thing. Yeah. It's taking that and bringing it in the fold of your faith, your religion. And this is why, like, when we have our narrations from our imams, like, for example, specifically one narration that comes to mind right now is a narration from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. It says, learn your religion, learn your faith, learn what's expected from you. That's going to help you in your journey. When you mentioned one of the chapters of your book, I immediately thought of the narration from the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "Man arafa nafsa arafa rabba." That Imam Ali alayhi salam narrated from him as well. Well, the one who knows himself knows his Lord. All of these things is going back to what? You spending the time to learn. You're spending the time to be aware. You're spending the time to discover. And it starts with you. I would advise, not because, again, I have everything figured out. Right. Not at all. Right. Not at all. But stop getting in your own way of growing and developing. Like, stop complicating things. Sit down and read. Sit down, reflect. Connect with good people, right? Connect with people that have the right values. Well, I haven't figured myself out yet. I'm like, okay, how much are you reading? How much are you reflecting? How much are you journaling? How much are you writing? Well, I don't journal. I don't write. I'm like, how are you going to figure yourself out if you're not having any kind of output? Well, I'm not a writer. I'm like, who said you need to be a writer? Put your thoughts down. Reflect. The Holy Prophet ﷺ says, an hour of reflection is worth 70 years of worship. There we go again, with the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam deconstructing this idea of what it means to worship God. Worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in everything. And look at these, like, focus on your family. Go out into the marketplace. Reflect. Share, like, all of these things is like, man, I didn't realize worship was also in these things. Yes, and it could be even more beneficial for you and better for you than the typical acts of worship that you're thinking of. That's not to say that you shouldn't be doing what is the general acts of worship that one expects. But it's like, okay, you pray, great, continue praying. Can you also reflect on that? Can you take an hour of reflection? Once you're doing all of these things, once you feel like, okay, I have my values, I know who I am, I know what my values are, then I want to bring people that share those values. Yeah. And again, the safety net for us, the safety valve, the framework that I go back to, like, I have some crazy ideas sometimes. I'm like, oh, I want to be creative. I want to do this. I want to do that. The thing that grounds me is my faith. The thing that grounds me, and by the way, I don't mean ground me in the way like, oh, it doesn't make me like, oh, I could be pursuing these like amazing, ambitious, great things, but my faith, brings me back down to earth. No, it grounds me like it protects me. It's that safety net for me. So then I want to bring other people that also have that same kind of grounding. So that when I'm growing, I know that they're not going to do things or advise me or direct me in a way that's going to go against my values and my principles. So when you're seeking mentorship, that seeking of mentorship, I would caution one who has a mentor that does not have the same values, or at least an alignment in values, or even at the least an appreciation and respect for your values, and that will advise you based on them, right? And that's like should be the minimum. That's necessary. Otherwise, your growth and development is going to be skewed, because if you haven't been able to identify those values for yourself and then move on that identification to like, oh, now I know people that have the same values. I'll tell you, for example, an experience that we had in my company and at our law firm. One of the first things that we worked on, and then we continue to work on, is identifying our core values. And the core values are not these generic, arbitrary stuff that every company is like, oh yeah, we want to work hard and have integrity and be honest and be the best. No, it was, we brought forth values that actually became action items. We have a code, it's called BGDC. It stands for Beast, Gem, Dawn, Champ. What those action items end up becoming were let's go, self-check, keep going, win. Those are our core values. They're actually action items, right? And then if people identified with those, they're a good fit for the company. If they didn't identify with them, they're not a good fit for the company, right? And literally it became part of the interview process, it became part of like the performance evaluation, it became part of et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that started from the very top. And there's constant questioning of like, hey, am I living up to these values within our company? And is this fully integrated in my life, right? For me, when I'm designing this framework of values, I actually had it where each one of them is also inspired by parts of our faith. When I'm bringing it back, I'm also sharing like, hey, listen, this is faith inspired. Okay, is a person okay being faith inspired or not? If you're not okay being faith inspired, then you're not going to be aligned with these values, honestly, because something's going to be off, whether it be from the first, the second, the third, or the fourth, right? I bring this example specifically why? And this is what I try to do as much as I can. I don't believe that a person can be successful as an individual without fully integrating all parts of their life. Otherwise, you're going to be living some form of a facade somewhere, somehow. You're going to be living some form of a dichotomy, some form of a duality, right? My professional life, I'm this, and my personal life, I'm this. In this business, I'm this, and this business, I'm that, right? You need to be you.
Like, that's where anxiety comes from, the inability to be your authentic self.
Beautiful, exactly. And that inability to be your authentic self is because sometimes we're thinking that the expectations in this space are conflicting or cannot live with the expectations in this space. In order for me to be, let's say in my personal life, a religious, a spiritual person, I can't also be competitive in the corporate space. Why? And by the way, it's not something only us as Muslims we face. It's this idea that in business, for example, you have to be of a certain mindset, of a certain personality, of a certain course of action even. You'll hear things like being cutthroat. You'll hear things like even, doing shady things. No. The examples of ethical, the examples of, morally sound, the examples of God-centric, conscientious businessmen and women are many. We don't need to use this blanket excuse of not being successful in the corporate world or in the business world because, I'm trying to be religious or spiritual. No, I think that's a cop-out. And I think that instead we should be challenging ourselves where within the corporate space, within the business world, how can we continue pressing forward that we need to make sure that our values are aligned. Yeah. If things are off, out of whack here, how do we make it better? Why? If you are in your business, in your company, and I've seen this personally, I've seen this with my teams, if our people are not doing well in their personal lives, they're not going to perform well in their professional life.
Absolutely.
And if they're feeling they can't be their authentic self, something is going to mess up. Something is going to go off. So I try to push as much as I can in the spaces that I'm in with integration. But that integration, by the way, can't happen without identification. Identification of what? Of values. What's important to you? Who are you? Yeah. What do you have? Right?
Yeah.
Similarly, in the spiritual and religious sense, within our religious communities, there may be an idea that, for example, wealth is bad.
Yeah.
Worldly success is bad. Yeah. Having more is bad. The reality is, challenges come with wealth, but challenges also come with poverty. Challenges come with having, ownership, having responsibilities, having more people relying on you. Yes, but challenges also come when you don't have those things. Yeah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us so many examples within the prophets, the imams, of what of those individuals that had so much. King Solomon, Nabi Sulaiman, Prophet Yusuf, Joseph, right? The High Chancellor of Egypt. Look at these examples. Prophet Muhammad himself. What I think we don't realize, our Prophet was able to unite, bring together, create a civilization, a nation, a state out of 100 warring tribes within 2 decades. And mostly within the second part of those 2 decades. What the Prophet did in Medina was miraculous. Not only did he bring people together that were Muslims, all these Arab tribes and all these people, but the Jews, the Christians, the non-Muslims, he had them under the charter of Medina. He was a statesman. At the end of his life, he had hundreds of thousands of people following him and coming into his faith in such a short period of time. And he did this not by the sword, he did this not by force, but he did this by showing people a way forward. It was leadership. Yeah. That's what he had. He had that magnificent character to lead people for betterment. A lot of people, when they joined Islam, it wasn't necessarily because they were so convinced that like, oh, I found the light, right? A lot of people did. They found the light, they followed it, they felt that movement, they felt inspired by it. Some saw it as an opportunity. And now we may be like, oh yeah, those were not the good people, the opportunity. But I will say, look at what an amazing thing that our Prophet did. That he even, for those people that were not interested spiritually in the faith, it was still such an opportunity where the religion enfranchised people that were like, hey listen, we're gonna get left behind if we don't join Islam. Meaning what? If you want to be successful, be a Muslim. Yeah. Like take a second to really think about that. Yeah. If you want to be successful, be a Muslim. If you want to be successful, join this community. If you want to be successful, become part of this society.
But that's what leadership is about. It's about speaking the language of the people, talking to people in a language they can understand, right? That's what leadership is about. And I think sometimes we forget that, right? And we don't realize how intelligent the prophets and the imams were, that they were speaking to their people and they managed to persuade them just through that, right? Speaking their language.
And so I'm very passionate about communication. Like I love it, and not because I've had a knack for it or, you know, and for me, I'm constantly trying to improve my communication, whether it be through my speaking, my writing. Communication is so important. Why? This is the mechanism for us to understand one another. There was one of the habits in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Covey that as soon as I heard it, like I didn't even read the book yet, as soon as I heard it, I was like, wow. It was like so meaningful for me. And the first time I heard it, I think I was 17 years old. And I heard it by a good friend of mine who had shared it. He was reading the book, and it was seek to understand in order to be understood, right? Seek to understand in order to be understood. I'm like, man, that's so powerful, because I realized I would not be able to understand people. I would not be able to have people understand me if I didn't stop interrupting them. I was 17. I was like, I realized, like, man, I interrupt people a lot. I don't let people finish their sentences. I'm like, oh, I know what you're gonna say. I know what you're gonna say. But let me tell you what, right? And I had to be sat down by good friends of mine who also played a mentorship role for me as a young man, where it was like, Jalal, listen, when you interrupt somebody, you're telling them that what you have to say is more important than what they're saying. Don't wait for the breaks in people's sentences. Let them finish their thought. Acknowledge them. Listen to them. Even if you have the selfish pursuit of you want them to understand you. When we're talking, isn't that the idea? Like, understand me. Let me explain. Let me share. Let me tell you, right? Even if that's the pursuit, the way to get there is by understanding the person. Understand them, and they'll understand you.
They say leaders speak last, right? And actually,
they eat last too.
Yeah, they eat last too. Yeah, Simon Sinek. But I think this podcast, that's what it's taught me, because I think we're very alike in the sense that, like, I'm also a speaker, so I just feel like I have so much to share. And this was probably one of the most challenging things I've done, is start a podcast, because now I have to listen to people and actually listen to understand, right? Instead of constantly giving my thoughts and my ideas, you know. I think you've covered so many important points here about self-reflection and accountability and finding out who you are. And, you know, a couple of things that, you know, I want to talk about is, I think a lot of us, right, including me, you know, there's a high sense of ego, right? And ego gets in the way, because when you have a sense of ego, you don't feel like there's anything wrong with you. And, you know, then it gets in the way of progress, right? So, you know, they say, I think there's a line, I think it's Imam Ali's line, where he says, kill your ego before you die, right? I think it's, I'm not sure if it is, but basically constantly killing your ego, constantly, you know, just going back to being humble, you know, like looking at yourself. And I think in a world like today, we're constantly trying to pick out people's mistakes and again, point fingers. And Islam is beautiful in a way where it's always back to you. You know, what are you doing wrong? What can you do better, you know? So I want to share from just my book a few tips that I feel will help people be accountable, you know. And I think one of them, like you said, is writing things down, journaling. You know, even your goals, they say you're 40% more likely to accomplish a goal if you write it down, right? Again, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. If you don't know what you want to accomplish, what your goals are, whether it's your personal, your professional goals, you, at the end of the year, again, there's no accountability, right? What did you do with all that time, right? Also just, sorry. Sorry about that. Also just slowing down, right? Taking moments in the day to, again, just be on your own, reflect on how your day went. The sense of gratitude, you talked about this at the beginning, where, you know, you've met your Uber driver who just had so much contentment. But where does contentment come from? It comes from being grateful where you are, right? We're constantly, and this is one thing that I struggled with, is gratitude, because I couldn't slow down. I was doing and doing and doing, and because I was doing so much, you know, nowadays when I'm outside, I look up at the stars and I'm like, oh my God, it's so beautiful. Because I didn't used to. I lived by the ocean. I run by the ocean every single day. It's now that I notice the colors. It's now that I actually enjoy living, because I'm reminding myself, again, it's not be grateful, be grateful. Why do you want to be grateful? What is it? You know, pick out, actually spend time, teaching your brain to pick out the beauty in the day, pick out, to see the good, pick out to, even through your challenges, see what you learned, right? This is a growth mindset, right? And I think a lot of, even me, this is a big struggle, right? That I'm so used to, I feel like, looking at life and being like, oh, but I could do better, and being so hard on myself. So I'm learning self-compassion as well, and I think in Islam it's so beautiful because God constantly tells us that, come back to me, and ask for forgiveness, come back to me, ask for forgiveness. And I think we need to also learn to forgive ourselves, right, for our shortcomings, and forgive ourselves for whatever mistakes we're making, but knowing that we're striving to do better, right? So what can you give me, maybe 3 to 5 tips on how our viewers could be better at being more accountable with their lives?
How they can be more accountable.
Yeah, for themselves. Just these micro habits, micro moments of accountability.
You mentioned a number of things, and as you're speaking about them, I think about what allows me, when I'm doing it right, because a lot of times I'm not doing it right? What I've found that has helped me tremendously in that accountability is remembering that without God, you have nothing. Now, how do I bring forth that sense of remembrance? If I were to kind of say it from the highest level, the top level, right? It would be God is my everything. Even that ego that like, I want to be, I want to make things happen. Like I want, right? If you take that ego and you tell it like, listen, I want to give it to you. Well, let's make it happen. But guess what? It's not going to happen without God. So even the things that are quote unquote self-serving, if you bring God, insert this notion, this idea that, listen, God's the only way forward. You're going to be doing the self-check wherever you go. One thing that's personally helped me, and I'm going to take it as a personal tip. I mentioned journaling in general. Anytime I get up to give a talk, a presentation, a speech, a lecture, I always write a short prayer before I go up. And in that short prayer, I usually say something along the lines of, God, forgive me for my shortcomings with you, and give me what only you can provide so that I can fulfill this task and do right by your name. God, allow me to be a tool in your service. And I promise you, God, anything that I have of success, it's all because of you. Let me share that. So give me the strength, give me the wisdom, give me the eloquence, give me the confidence so that I can go forward in that pursuit. I usually do this before I get up, right? To give a talk, give a speech. But I found myself doing that anytime I needed to do anything. And then it became like, all right. Literally, even when it came to, closing on a client in the boardroom, short prayer. It came to, playing with my kids. God, let me be the father I need to be for my kids. Once you start transitioning away from, and I'll tell you again personally, and Fatima, I know you mentioned to me like, hey, listen, I want you to share the personal stories, and I'm trying. So if I were to tell you on the personal level, I'm very much about like, I can do it. I'm very much about like, I'm gonna make it happen. Like let's go, all right? I constantly self-check to, let's go, but only because God's given it to you. Yeah. God's gonna make it happen for you. Yeah. Like I can't sit still. Like I can't. I gotta do something. I gotta move. I gotta make things happen, right? Even in that, it's like you gotta bring it back to God. Yeah. Those are a couple things I would say. In addition to that, another tip I would mention is put yourself around people and in settings that are going to reinforce that for you. That having a friend, a good friend, that you go out with for coffee, you go watch a movie with, you go out just for like a drive, whatever it may be, you go and take a walk with, whatever it may be. That person that's going to help reinforce that for you. Yeah. Just being there. They don't need to speak, they don't need to tell you anything. It's just their presence brings you closer to God. I have some friends that are like that, right? I mentioned earlier like how instrumental for me my wife and my mentor are, but I have a very small group of people that are like that for me. And I have identified over the years some other people in my life that may not be like that for me. Though I may love them, I need to love them a little bit more at a distance because they put me on a different part of the spectrum, all right? They don't bring out necessarily the best out of me. So whether it be certain, friends, family members, relatives, whoever it may be, right? You need to be conscientious of that. Furthermore, I would say, so we talked about social media earlier, practical tip. Listen, what pages are you following? Shout out, follow Fatima, right? But what pages are you following? Why are you following them, right? When you're scrolling, like, have a little bit more intention with that. And I think if you look at like, hey, all these pages that you're following, I mean, there may be friends, there may be acquaintances, people that you've come across, sure, no problem. But like, there's certain people that like over the years that you intentionally click follow, right? That also is going to help you reinforce those values or not help you. They may They may actually have you stray away from them. And I'd be like, really? Like, it's you know, a social media page? Like, I don't even spend that much time. It could be like a fleeting moment, right? You could be going to the mall, you could be going to the marketplace, wherever, right? Is this environment, like physical or digital, is it helping you move forward? If it's not, stop it. If it is, up it.
So you talked about three very important things. You said purpose, you talked about the friends you keep, and you talked about the kind of what social media, sort of what influence you have around you, right? So I had a mentor a few days ago, a mentee a few days ago, and you know, she was actually very interested in like personal development, and she wanted to grow, right? And she asked me a very interesting question. She said, Fatima, I have these friends, you know, and it's a group of us, and I love them. They're my friends for years and years and years. But, you know, they're just, you know, I'm growing and they're not growing.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't want to leave. Like, I love them. I want to spend time with them. So what do I do? So I want to ask you your thought process, and then I'll share a little bit about you, about what I said to her.
What would I tell her?
Yeah.
Run. No, I'm just kidding. What I would say is you need to make the tough decisions. The problem is many of us want things but are not willing to make the sacrifices that come with getting them, right? Like someone may say, I want to get married. There's certain sacrifices that you have to make when you get married, right? And listen, like you're gonna learn it one way or another. And you need to make adjustments. With kids, same way. With certain businesses, everyone nowadays wants to be an entrepreneur. Being an entrepreneur nowadays is a very, very attractive thing, right? It's like, yeah, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm founder of this, CEO of this. Everyone wants to put like some type of C-suite, you know, lettering next to their name, and founder, right? I'm like, okay. You realize there are businesses you will not see a return from for years. What? Yes. That cash flow, if there is any positive, you're gonna need to reinvest in the business. What do you mean? I'm like, listen, do you want entrepreneurship or do you want to buy yourself a job? We're not talking about buying yourself a job, right? Well, I can't do that. All right, you're not willing to sacrifice, right? There's so much, like people ask, how do you do what you do? There's sacrifices. There's a lot of sacrifices. It's like, oh, I want to do what you do. Okay, don't ask to, I want to do what you do. Ask, I want to sacrifice what you sacrifice. People want to become like Ahlul Bayt, right? Forget us for a second, right? Forget me for a second. I'm not the role model here. I'm not the person who's going to tell you how to be successful. You look at Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, the Prophet Muhammad and his beautiful, immaculate family. You want to be like them? Sacrifice what they sacrificed. When you increase in leadership, you increase in sacrifice. That's a universal principle when it comes to leadership. You see it in the business world, you see it in the spiritual world. You want to become a leader, sacrifice more, give more. But like, how do I be like Ahlul Bayt? How do I be like even the companions of Ahlul Bayt? Give more. What did they let go of? What did they sacrifice? Like people are like, I want to become spiritual. You want to become spiritual? I'm like, people have difficulty. I have difficulty. I have a commitment. Let's say I want to read a juz of Quran every single day, right? It takes literally like half hour to 40 minutes to read a juz of Quran. It's like, it's not a big deal. Really, when you think about it, like, oh yeah, regular reading, a person may read half hour to an hour a day, right? I'm struggling with that. Let's say there were some companions of the Imams and the Prophet that used to recite the Holy Quran once a day. And they're like, what? How? Well, then they try to explain it to themselves. Oh, this person probably didn't work. No. They did it at night. What? Well, how? What? Like, listen, you want to do something, you want to get there, you can make it happen. Sitting down with a group of brothers, I love them, I care about them. And they're like, Haj, you can't do this, we can't do this, it's not possible, we're too busy, blah, blah, blah. If I wanna increase my abilities and my success rate and blah, 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 in my career, right? I gotta stop being active in the community, right? I told them, you're lying to yourself, and you're entitled to lie to yourself. Yeah. But I care about you, so I don't want you to lie to yourself. It's like, what do you mean? I'm not lying to myself. I'm like, if you were to reduce the amount of time you spend smoking hookah and the gatherings that you have on shisha, right? Now people are gonna think I'm dogging on shisha and hookah, right? I'm dogging on making excuses for where you're not where you need to be. If you were to reduce whatever time that you have hanging out with friends, the mindless activities, right? The ones that are just sitting and just nothing's happening, right? I'm not telling you eliminate them all. You need time to chill. Reduce it by an hour. Give yourself back that hour a week. And then take it an hour a day. If you gave yourself, starting off an hour a week, what would you do with the hour a week? And then the hour a day, what would you do with the hour a day? So for our young mentee here, what I would say is don't cut off your friends, but think about where are you spending that time and what is it costing you? If that cost is something that you'd be like, I can't bear this cost anymore. There's certain things I found in my life, I couldn't bear the cost anymore. Yeah. Whether it be to my mental health, to my physical health. It'd be like, when I started training physically with a trainer and I realized, man, my body's not as strong as I want it to be. I'm like, I can't afford the cost of not being strong, not just for myself, for my kids. I thought immediately, the other day, I was planking, right? My trainer was like, you gotta plank, you gotta hold it for a minute. And I'm like, I was struggling. Yeah. I was struggling. You know who I thought about first? I thought about my son. My son's 3. I'm like, why are you thinking about your son? I'm like, because I always tell my son, Ali, you're strong. Yeah. So anytime he stubs his toe or something, I'm like, Ali, you're a lion. You're strong, Baba. He's like, yeah, I'm strong. Yeah. But if I'm not strong, I can't be strong for my son. Yeah. How do I expect him to be strong, right? Yeah. And I need to be physically strong. So some people are like, oh, I'm too busy to work out. I'm too busy to... Really? Okay. If you don't spend this time on yourself, on being better for yourself, physically, spiritually, intellectually, socially, financially, this is my 5-point framework, right? If you don't spend this time on you, developing you, how are you going to carry out the pursuits that you have and the achievements that you want to attain in every aspect of your life if you're not spending that time on yourself? And if there's certain friends in my life that are taking me away from that, I love them, but I love them at a distance. Yeah. I may spend 10 hours a week with them, 5 hours a week from them. I'll reduce it maybe an hour or 2. Why? I need to be better for myself and for them.
So what was interesting is, I spoke to her and I told her, change the conversation. So, when you're around them, change the conversations you've had. And this is something I've had to do with my friends, sometimes you're, with your girlfriends, and I have a very different schedule. Unfortunately, I don't have time to even like the same things as my girlfriends, so my conversations are very different. Yeah. So of course, I'm also a leader, so I try to listen. I try to meet them where they are. Sure. But when I was speaking to the mentee, I said to her that, try to change the conversation around, around your friends to something more positive. Spin it, right? And I think the more you do that, the more people will kind of either stop hanging out with you, or they'll catch on and they'll say, okay, sometimes you need someone to inspire you to change the conversation. Sometimes, it's just about like a redirection, but I spoke a little bit about this in my book, that sometimes you're in a situation where, you're just surrounded by people with a very fixed mindset. So what do you do with those friends? And I think, I believe in dealing with everything with a sense of humility. So even if it means stepping back, it's important that you do it with a sense of humility, you do it with a sense of love, because we don't realize how much we're going to be affecting people, with our actions. And I think that again goes back to being God-centric, right? If you're doing it for the sake of Allah, do it with with a sense of mercy, with a sense of love, with a sense of compassion and humility, right? So, it's interesting because I tell people that I have the best friends. I have the most amazing friends. I'm very blessed in that way. My friends are people that I know that have my back. They're people that I know share the same values as me. Sometimes they share the same values. Sometimes our interests are very different. And that's why I have a lot of different groups of friends for different purposes, right? But to their core, they share the same values as me, And I've seen how much it's helped my own self-growth, and how much it's helped me become a better leader, a better person, just having the right kind of people around me.
Yeah.
So, I think, friendships is a big thing, especially for youth as well. Right now, so many people are trying to fit in, and, we all want to find that tribe of ours, So it's important to think about who you are and what kind of people you want to attract in your life, because that's going to make a huge impact, right? You're known by the company you keep.
Absolutely.
Right?
And I think one thing I'd want to add there, Fatima, is people when they're growing, you mentioned humility, right? The other attribute I would say that's so important with that humility is grace.
Right.
People need to be graceful in their journey when it comes to the other people in their life that maybe watching and seeing. They're not necessarily going to be on your journey with you. They're not necessarily going to be on the same level. I mentioned, hey, you may need to drop certain settings, certain friends. But even when you do, you have to be graceful.
Yeah.
Even when you do, you have to do it with love.
Yeah.
And you don't need to be extra about it and be going up to guys, I'm in my path on my journey. I'm gonna need to reduce my time with you because my mentor said I need to. No, you don't need to do it like that. But just like a person gets busy with anything, right? Allow your friends a window into your development.
Yeah.
Give them for example, and I think probably the easiest things to do, or the easiest spaces, if I'm looking at, let's say, in the five points, physical, spiritual, intellectual, social, and financial, probably the easiest one is in the physical, right? So let's say, for example, somebody starts, working out, exercising, conditioning, training, right? You just allowing them a window into that and showing excitement on your results, right? So a month in, you show them, hey, listen, look how strong I became. Look at, now I'm able to run my mile in this amount of time. Or look how much weight I lost, right? I'm now able to fit in the clothes that I used to, et cetera, et cetera. That will then have them be thinking, good for you. Maybe I should be doing it. Without even telling them, hey, you need to be doing this for your health, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to mental health, right? You may, for example, start taking on certain practices and certain things that will help you in your emotional well-being and your mental health. Maybe, for example, you're now a better listener. Have that come through your conversations. Stop interrupting your friends and make a show of it, right? I mean, not wait for them hey, did you notice I'm not interrupting you anymore? But basically, bring the things that you're practicing into the relationship. If these people are aligned with your values, hold on to them. They may not be at the same level as you, but hold on to them and then bring those practices so that you can better those relationships. Maybe you're that person, you're that friend that's going to be helping them. But I will caution with this. Sometimes we'd be thinking about to ourselves oh, I'm going to guide my friends. I'm going to be the one who's going to inspire them. I'm going to change our group. I am very wary. People ask me hey, how do I become a speaker? How do I get in front of more? I want to help people. I'm One, I actually don't know how to become a speaker. They're like, what do you mean? You're a speaker. I'm like, I never sought it. I never like went out into the world and I'm like, world, I want to become a speaker. There were certain opportunities that came my way that I was constantly going back and checking with my mentor as in, should I do this or should I do this? And there were those opportunities came about. And in that journey, there was always an emphasis on, are you growing yourself? Mm-hmm. Are you implementing yourself? Are you developing yourself? Then you can share.
Absolutely.
In this journey, we need to constantly be checking ourselves that, hey, it's not about me inspiring other people. It's not about me being the one to help other people. It's, am I being better every single day? And by my conduct, by me being me. Stop thinking, what are the things I need to do? Can you be you? And then from you being you, you're inspiring other people, right? So when I, for example, when I come, though you and I, Fatima, we had a good conversation before we started, and we were talking about it, I didn't come in my mind and like, I'm gonna say this, and this. Whatever I'm sharing with you is something that's already there.
Yeah.
When I go and I'm speaking on a subject, right? Whatever it may be, even in like a setting of presenting a pitch to a client on hiring our law firm to start doing these certain legal services in the corporate space. I'm never talking about something I don't know. Which goes back to something you emphasized earlier was, how do you be your authentic self? That authenticity can only be there when you're what? Aligning what you know with the value. If you're speaking outside of the knowledge and outside of the value, the authenticity is not going to be there. It's going to come out as fake, and you're going to lose trust and rapport with people. Trust and rapport with people, to me, is one of the most important things.
Absolutely.
Because if I'm not in somebody's heart, I'm not in their life.
Mm-hmm.
And the way to enter someone's heart is to speak from the heart. Imam Ali alayhi salam says, it's attributed to him, that he said, what comes from the heart enters the heart. So unless you're really like focusing on you, this is like, I want to change the world, I want to do this, I want to inspire, focus on you. Focus on you.
And I think it's so interesting because I tell people this book, it took me 4 years to write. The book, my first book, Marketing for an African Powerhouse, I wrote it on my sabbatical, 2 months. I was in Lebanon and I finished the book because it was so easy, right? To write about something that was running in my blood, right? This book took me 4 years because I had to live it. I had to live this journey of looking inwards, right? I had to live the journey of like taming the chaos in myself. And you know, I've noticed with myself that the more I focus on myself, I have very little time to focus on what's around me, right? And in a sense of, again, you know, you start to see the world as a reflection of your internal world, right? Everything becomes a mirror, right? Nowadays, I always ask myself, I used to be very reactive. And this was something that I struggled with a lot. I was very reactive to situations when things didn't go my way, when, you know, someone would say something. And nowadays I pause before I react and I ask myself, why is this bothering me? Like, what is inside me that's bothering me about what this person said, right? There's something I need to work on myself. And alhamdulillah, I've realized that in the last 2 years, everyone is seeing this change, like you said, because I'm working on myself. I've stopped even feeling bad about things anymore because I've taken it in my stride. I'm like, if something's recently I was uninvited to a lunch because one of my friends told me, well, they don't like it that you're not gossiping and then you're quite boring in a social sense. And in terms of, unfortunately, when it comes to certain things, and you know, I laughed because I actually, you know, I felt that, okay, you know, sometimes it's good because you're being protected in so many ways, right? And I just feel like, again, you know, it all comes down, like you said, to you. Work on yourself, right? Try to make yourself better. Be the best version of yourself. And the more we focus on that, the less the world is going to start to disturb us. And I think this is where the Ahlul Bayt did the best. It was always about them. It was always about focusing inwards. That's why the things outside them didn't shake them in any way, right? Why did Bibi Zainab say that all I see is beauty? Right? We keep saying these things. Oh, she said all I see is beauty. It's I had it on a t-shirt and I was like, oh, this is so beautiful, like 4 or 5 years ago. And then, when I started to really think about these words, it's because her internal world was about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's it. So all she saw outside was Allah. She did not care about anything, that there was nothing else inside her but God, right? So all she saw outside was God. And this is what we need to strive to. And I struggle with this every day, but at night, and this is a practice that has really helped me, I take accountability on my day. There was a time in my life I did not remember what I did during the day because it was just go, go, go.
Yeah.
And by the end of the week, someone would ask me, oh, but Fatima, we spoke on Monday. And I'm like, what? I don't remember speaking to you, because again, there's no accountability. And this is a personal example. But I started to write down, what went well during the day, what didn't go well, how I could do better, and again, it all comes back to what can you do better, and focusing less on other people, because that's not your business. And I think the more you set your own compass straight, the more everything else falls into place beautifully, right? And I want to transition into purpose, because you spoke about your purpose being that, I love that, and I think I'm going to take that practice on of writing down that, this is all for you, God, right? Like whatever good is going to come out is for your sake, right? And I think that sense of purpose, it also makes life so much easier, because it takes attention away from yourself. When I used to teach public speaking, I would tell people, stop focusing so much on you, and focus on your message. Focus on how this message is going to help other people, right? And that will take off the kind of that pressure off you. But imagine doing that with God, where you're just like, you know what, God, this is for your sake. You take off the pressure from yourself, and now you're just like, this is all about you, God, right? And I talk about purpose because alhamdulillah, I found my purpose a very long time ago, and I've always felt that my purpose was to something much bigger than me. It was to create impact. It was to make a change in my community, within myself, in society. So I want to ask you, you talked about your purpose, which is based on godliness, on realization that everything is rooted in God. What advice do you have for people who are struggling to find a sense of purpose in their life?
It's an excellent question. Those who serve don't struggle with purpose.
Yeah.
And that's what I would recommend. And even if someone may hear me say that right now and be like, well, no, I do serve, but I still struggle with purpose. If you serve knowing who you're serving and why you're serving, you may still struggle with purpose, but if you reflect on it, you're going to see fulfillment for yourself. Because when we're looking at our role, we don't know how much time we got in this life, right? The only thing I can control in this life is what I do. The only thing I can control in this life, though I may not be able to control certain scenarios, situations, circumstances, I can control the way I interact with those circumstances. If you choose in every situation, I want to be of service. I want to be of service to my fellow man, my fellow person, my fellow, and ultimately be of service to God. Why? All this is for God.
Yeah.
All of it is for God. Now some people are like, well, that kind of sounds a little high level philosophical. I'm like, no. It's probably the most practical thing I could say. If I look at everything around me, right? I look at my sister in front of me, she's a trust from God. I look at my brother across the room from me, he's a trust from God. I look at my own self, this is a trust from God to me. Jalal, what are you doing with what God has given you? Literally in your own person. My children, my wife, the people that I love, the people that even I don't like, the people that have hurt me. All of it is from God. And you're constantly thinking, how do I be of service? It's liberating.
Yeah.
So if you're struggling with purpose, I say serve. Be of service. Do things for other people, and ultimately try to make sure that all of it is with the intention of God and being of service to you. A lot of people don't realize this, and I found out that I didn't realize this when I reflected, was, man, the power of asking God. Like people are like, man, why haven't I figured things out yet? Why haven't I accomplished the things I want to accomplish yet? Why do I still have a crisis of identity? You know why? Because you're trying to figure it out yourself. You're trying to do it all on your own. Well, how has that been going for you? Why don't you take a moment and take some humility, take a step back and say, God, help me figure it out. Even in that, helping me figure it out. Ya Allah, show me, help me. It may not happen like this, because guess what? You may not be ready for it. People constantly, like, we as human beings, we're like, why hasn't God answered my prayers yet? It's not a deficiency in God. It's probably a deficiency in you. It's probably because maybe you're not ready yet. And God loves you so much that He's giving you the opportunity to get to the point to accept the grace and the gift and the blessing that He's going to give you. But really, just lean into that faith in God. Ask God. Be with God. It will do you wonders.
Yeah. And you know, there's a beautiful quote by Nietzsche. He said, "He who has a why in life can bear any how." Right? And look at today, the life of the Palestinians. You know, if you see social media, why are so many people converting to Islam? Because look at Palestine right now. Look at what's happening. These people are suffering and they're still praising God. And they're still, you know, I always think about if this genocide was to happen in the West. People have such a crisis of identity that I think that they would go crazy, right? Just think about if this happened anywhere else, right? But there's a reason, and I always believe, obviously, this is all God's will, right? There's a reason. This is to show us all that their unwavering faith is because they know their why. Their why is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They know that where they're going. This is all, you know, this is all like how. Like this is their how that they have to struggle. That, you know, they're suffering, but for a very short period of time, right? And I think it's a very important perspective to have, right? That you have this bigger purpose. And I think on the days where you get exhausted and the days that, and all of us do this, you know, even I get so tired sometimes, but because I know my why, I feel like it gives me the momentum to keep going on, you know? I want to move into a very important subject, which I think we touched on, which is detachment. You know, it's actually one of the last chapters in my book, and you know, it's. I watched a Jay Shetty quote where he quoted Imam Ali, and he said that Imam Ali said. He said, you know, detachment is not that you own nothing, but that nothing owns you. You know, it's so interesting. You go on Instagram now and there's people who are like using that voice and they're like making these aesthetic videos and you're just like, yeah, my Imam said that, you know, and it makes me so happy because, you know, it's so true that Islam is not there to tell you don't own nice things and, you know, don't drive a nice car and, you know, don't look nice. Absolutely do it, but don't let it consume you, right? To the point of like making you go crazy sometimes, right? So what do you believe, like how do you practice a sense of detachment?
There was a similar expression that was shared that when I heard it, it really resonated with me on the whole subject of detachment, especially as described by Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. And it was, imagine yourself at sea and you're in a ship, you know, you're in a boat. That boat, so long as no water enters it, it'll sail the sea, as it should. The boat should be sailing the sea above water. But as soon as that water enters the ship, enters the boat will sink.
Yeah.
We are the boat. This world is the sea.
Yeah.
Be the boat, sail the sea. Just don't let the sea, don't let the water enter you, enter your boat.
Yeah.
For me, from a practical standpoint, I've had a number of things humble me, right? I've had times in business where, I saw a few zeros in my bank account and I was like, oh man, we're doing well. And then I've had times in business where the zeros were on the other side, right? I as a young professional, I've faced the struggle of not knowing if I could afford buying diapers for my kids. Like I've gone through it, and alhamdulillah, and I've also faced times where like, oh man, we're doing very well. I don't have to think about budgeting and expensing, right? You still do, but you don't have to like worry about it, right? Also had the honor and privilege of being able to like be of help to other people, right? That's huge. For me, from my background, my family, my personal experience, that's very big for me, is being able to be of means so that the people around you and the things that you want to support can get taken care of, right? In that whole experience, I always had to remind myself and have the people around me to remind me that this isn't because of you. Whatever you have or don't have is because of God.
Yeah.
When I had that, like, alhamdulillah, I drive a nice car, I have nice suits, I have things, right? But why do I have these things? Why did I buy this particular car? Why did I get this particular suit? Why did I go to this particular place, right? We need to be of the mindset of driving everything that we do with purpose, and not allowing those things to essentially consume us. Are you okay if you didn't drive that car? Or is it gonna drive you crazy? Like, no, me not driving this car? No, I can't be seen in a different kind of car, right? Why? Who are you? Who am I?
I think, and this is something that I've worked on a lot. For me, detachment is that I always look at myself as that I have value, right? It's not the things that I own that make me who I am, right? And I think in a world of social media where you have these influencers and every other thing is an ad, right? Buy this and do this and become this and wear this and then you will have value. I've figured out that, and I'm with that, I'm very happy with myself, where I know my value is much bigger than that. It's rooted in that I know, and I struggled with this at the beginning. I think, my value was placed very much on my title and my name and my accomplishments and what people think of me. And then I went through a transition and I realized that my self-worth comes from God. And God says this, that I give you self-worth. Don't ask other people to give you that worth. It only comes from me. And I think it's such a game changer, because then you might have these nice things, but it's like that, the fluff around, it's just there. Whether it goes or comes, it just doesn't matter to you, right? But ultimately, it's who you are. And I always talk about legacy, right? What do you want to be remembered as, right? I always imagine myself like people around my grave, and what are they saying about me? Who was Fatima? Was she someone who was kind? Was she someone who spoke well? Who made some sort of difference, right? Like, no one's gonna remember the car you drove. Like, it's just, and this is perspective, I think, and again, reminding yourself every single day and asking yourself these questions, right? That what kind of legacy do I want to leave behind, right? Who do I want to be remembered as? I just yesterday I was having a conversation with my brother, and I said, if people knew how quickly you're forgotten after you die, none of this would matter. And it's so true, because at the end of the day, again, it's that goalpost, right? People are going to keep changing the goalpost, and if you don't know who you are, you're going to keep changing with that, right? But if you're centered, and you're centered in God, and you're centered in your purpose, which is bigger than you, nothing's going to shake you, right? And so I think it's so important to, again, remain detached from these worldly things.
Absolutely. And I think as you were talking about it, it was bringing me back to when we're looking at those specific things, if you don't know your self-worth and instead you're attaching your self-worth with having, then the depreciation that you experience with a car, with a home, with anything else, you're right there with it. I cannot, and this is one of the reasons why I feel there's so much power in faith, so much power in religion, so much power in allowing yourself the opportunity to have a relationship with God, because it's like, man, so many things change, right? Like now this is a trend, this is in fashion, right? Now this, for example, hairstyle, for example, I have curly hair. It doesn't show right now. It's kind of showing probably maybe because of the humidity, right? It's probably going off. But, I have curly hair. When I was, in university, I had this just like curly hair, big poofy look. At that time, it was not cool. It was not in style, right? Now, at least in the States, in Michigan right now, that's the look, right? And like there's kids that are like, they don't have curly hair, but they're going and changing their hair to have that curly poofy look. And it's like, that's the thing. And I'm like, man, I would have been so much cooler, if that was the trend or whatever at that time. But whatever the trend may be, whatever the thing may be, it changes. That thing can also be no more, right? Can you and I decide for ourselves, do you want to be infinite? Do you want to be forever? Right? You talked about legacy. I love that. But even beyond what the people around you remember at your grave, what about the one who never forgets? What about the one who will always be? Who am I to him? That's what I want at the end of the day. And by the way, that doesn't mean I stop everything I'm doing, I go isolate myself into, no. I want to be so present. I want to be a lion in every single day of my life. But I want to approach it with a monk-like mindset. Not a monastic mindset, a monk-like mindset that Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam described, right? Lions in the day, monks in the night. That we come forward into life with that mindset. But hey, you're number one. But number one for who? Not for them, not for everybody, for God. That's what I want. That's where I want to be. And that's why I would love for people to be inspired to have that. It's not, by the way, it's not an easy thing, but it's simple. The task of this life, success is simple, it's difficult, it's not complicated, it's simple, but it's hard. And that's why it means so much. And that's why it's so awesome. Because it's not something that anybody can just attain, by just sitting back and watching life pass them by. Apply yourself, be there, be present, take control, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be there for you so that you can manifest all the greatness that He has in store for you.
And I think, when it comes to self-love, I think when you're rooted in God, your habits, your lifestyle, the way you interact with people, the way you interact with yourself will always be beautiful because it's rooted in something so divine and pure, because if you're doing it for yourself, you'll also lose momentum, right? If you're doing it for your selfish desires, you will not be consistent. But if it's rooted in God, I believe there's a sense of consistency. And this is something I've seen in my own life, the changes I've made to myself, my own character, like how spirituality has completely transformed the very essence of me. And even, for a long time, I didn't know what internal peace looked like. I didn't know what just being calm in my body looked like. Because again, I struggled with this. Like I was rooted in so many other things. And I'm not very materialistic, but I was very rooted in like, oh, I need to achieve this and I need to be known as this, But now that I feel like everything's rooted in God, I feel like life's become, like you said, it's simple.
Yeah.
It's not complicated anymore. Right? So I think we're at the end of our podcast, and I just want to say that I learned so much from you. I always ask my viewers, I always ask my guests, do you love yourself? But I don't need to ask you, because I feel like I can feel it and I can hear it in the way that you speak about love and you speak about God. But maybe if you have one tip or one piece of advice for people who are still at the beginning of their journey on self-love, what would be that piece of advice?
When it comes to self-love, in our faith-based akhlaq, in our Islamic ethics, there's hubbun nafs that is of a different kind. So there's two connotations, I would say, when it comes to self-love. Hubbun nafs, typically as described in Islamic ethics, is one that speaks to one who is indulged in their own whims and desires, and in contrast or in contradiction to God's love.
Okay.
Self-love here, the way I'm understanding it from you, Fatima, and at least the way it's being presented, is a gateway to allow oneself to accept God's love. In order to do that, I think it's important for us to realize our journey is going to have so many different levels and stages, and there isn't, at least for me, I know some people that have made transformations in their lives that basically looked like, I changed this and and like now my life's so different, right? My experience has been more so of constantly going back and forth, and like you grow in one area and then you're getting challenged in another area. And then you grow in that area and you get challenged in another area. Can you forgive yourself? Can you be kind enough to yourself? Can you let yourself so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can do His work for you? That's it. That's what I would focus on, is you and I are the only thing stopping us from us accepting God's love, His grace, His mercy, the beauty that He has for us in this world and the next. Truly. If you want something badly enough, God is going to give it to you. Now, what is that thing that you want? Is it His love? Is it what's eternal? Is it what's endless? Then He's going to give it to you. Or is it something that's finite? The choice is yours, but make the wise choice, right? Can you align yourself with God and then essentially be one who's like, man, I'm good forever, right? It's a journey, it's a commitment. It's going to require a lot. I would say on that journey of self-love, so that self-love, again, the definition here being that self-love that allows you to accept God's love, I would say be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself, forgive yourself, allow that whatever experience that you had, don't be like, oh, that's a different person. Sure, it might be. You're different, you've changed, but that was part of your journey. You needed to experience that there in order to get to where you want to be, where you are now and where you want to be. Can you be kind to yourself to acknowledge that and put your trust in God, your faith in God, that He's going to carry you through?
Yeah, in Kumail, it says that we wrong ourselves, right? It's us that wrong our own nafs, right? And I love that you said that we need to get out of our own way so that God can do the work for us. Sometimes we talk about Allah's mercy, but there's no mercy within ourselves, right? We talk about His forgiveness, but we don't forgive ourselves. We're so hard on ourselves, and we have to have self-compassion in order to cultivate that self-love.
Now, that self-compassion, that cultivation of self-love, I would add is you being hard on yourself is okay if it gets you to the next level. You being hard on yourself and not having compassion and it keeps you where you are, no, what's the point of that? What's the point? I can be critical of myself to grow, but I'm not going to be critical of myself to keep me down. That's the difference.
There has to be movement.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if there's movement, there's going to be change. And that movement, again, I'm going to keep on going back. If that movement is tied to God, you're going to take me forward.
Yeah.
God, you're going to push me. I'm making the decision. But truly, the power and the ability is with God. And then He moves you.
Yeah. And, you know, I absolutely love that. I think, you know, just, I haven't ever had someone explain it to me in that way, that to be open to God's love, you know. And I think that just to add on, it's so important that sometimes we get so overwhelmed because we think that we can change things in a day, or we think that things are going to happen overnight. And like you said, the challenges will keep coming up. But this is where I feel the micro moments are important, the small habits every single day. Do small things every single day when you have your purpose, whether it is, you know, for us as Muslims, which is to get to God, right? To get closer to Allah, or everything to be rooted in Him. Or if it's for non-Muslims who it's a purpose greater than themselves, whether it's a sense of service, right? Remind yourself of that purpose and then do little things every single day to reach there. It's just small changes every single day, and then before you know it, it becomes part of your lifestyle. It becomes who you are, right? And so this is what I keep emphasizing, you know, to my viewers, to everyone, small habits every single day, and you know, at the end of the year, you'll see a completely transformed person, I feel. Thank you, Jalal. It was such a beautiful interview. I really wish we had more time to just, there's so much to cover, you know. So I will definitely invite you for another episode, and we can continue having these amazing conversations. But I just want to say thank you. You've taught me so much today. You've changed my perspective so much on just self-love and how I could do better. So I'm just so excited for everyone to also listen into this conversation and, you know, hopefully learn something.
Thank you, Fatima, for having me on. It was a pleasure, and I've definitely learned from you as well. And I'm looking forward to more conversations and continuing to inspire one another, and our listeners to keep growing, focus on themselves, put their best effort forward, live today. Imam Ali alayhi salam, and I'll end with this, he says, live this life as if you live forever, but live for the next life as if you'll die tomorrow.
Yeah. Thank you so much.